I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
Hello and welcome to Everything Fear, your one-stop shop for all things horror. I'm Kit Tinsley, I'm a horror author, film academic and general horror geek. The slasher genre's popularity was waning by the mid-1990s. The heavy hitters were in a creative slump. Freddy, Jason, Michael, they were all stuck in a cycle of endlessly derivative sequels and diminishing returns. The figures of fear of the 80s had become little more than a parody of their original glory. Freddy Krueger's creator, Wes Craven, tried to rectify this in 1994 when he returned to the Elm Street franchise. The film, New Nightmare, however, despite being critically acclaimed, didn't do that well in the box office. Perhaps audiences weren't ready for what Craven tried to do by turning the Nightmare franchise into a postmodern, meta, self-referential horror movie. 2 years later though, in 1996, Wes Craven would come back with another slasher movie, one that took the postmodern self-reference of New Nightmare and instead of turning it on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, turned it on the slasher genre itself. With a hip script from Dawson's Creek creator Kevin Williamson, an incredibly cool cast, and an iconic new slasher villain in the form of Ghostface, Wes Craven unleashed Scream onto an unexpected world, and things would never be the same again. Next year we are expecting the 6th entry in the Scream franchise, but today we're going to look at what has come before and rank the first 5 movies in the Scream franchise. Number 5, Scream 3. I don't think this one will come as a surprise to anyone. Released in 2000, Scream 3 was the first entry not written by Kevin Williamson. This movie was written by relative newcomer Ehren Kruger, who would go on to have incredible success. He even wrote this year's smash hit Top Gun Maverick. But Scream 3 was still early in his career. It's not a bad film. I don't think there's a single entry in the entire Scream franchise that could be called a bad film. However, this does feel like the Jumping the Shark movie. It takes the whole self-referential nature of the first 2 movies and really amps them up beyond belief, with characters working with characters who play them as characters within the franchise of the movie. Yeah. To solve the murders. There are some great moments like Jenny McCarthy's murder sequence, which is really tense and funny at the same time, or how it presents the series' final girl, Sydney, as being utterly traumatised by the events of the first 2 movies and really struggling to move on with her life. It does feel though like sometimes it doesn't know what to do with some of its characters. Some plot points feel rushed or not given the attention they deserve to set up a satisfactory ending for the movie. And the character of Roman Bridger, what a whiny little bitch that guy is. Number 4, Scream 4. Scream 4 was a return to form for the franchise, coming 11 years after Part 3 in 2011. People believed it was over, a trilogy completed, but think again. Wes Craven returned to direct, so did the cast, and perhaps most importantly, so did Kevin Williamson. This was Scream, but different. This was a new age. The internet had become a much more important part of not only daily life, but of movie fandom. So having our horror experts being kids who live stream their love of the genre seemed really up to date. Also, whereas in the original movie, Randy was the horror movie expert, but he was presented as being a nerd, a geek. This movie shows that yes, horror fans can be nerds, but they can also be Kirby, possibly the coolest and sexiest character to ever appear in the franchise. Bringing in Sydney's cousin as the new teen in peril was a really great move because it moved Sydney into this new role of protector/mentor. The new dynamic between Gale and Dewey is interesting as well. Dewey is now the sheriff of Woodsboro. Gale is no longer a journalist and is struggling to write her first fiction book. Whereas in the past it's always felt like Dewey needed to solve the case to prove himself, and Gale needed to solve it for glory. This time it feels the other way round. This franchise has always used new technology incredibly well, right back in 1996 with the original being one of the first movies to really use mobile phones, cell phones, American viewers, as a major plot point. And then in this movie with using live streaming and the internet as a vital part of the plot and the tension of the movie. The scene where Gale is hunting for the killer in a barn full of people dressed up as Ghostface while Dewey's watching the live stream is one of the most tense scenes in the whole series. And the end conflict in this movie between Sidney and the remaining killer is one of the most brutal in the whole series. Number 3, Scream 2. Scream 2 was released in 1997, just a year after the original movie. However, this did not feel like the usual sort of rushed cash grab sequel that horror franchises are known for. It feels like a well thought out continuation of the story. Here we find Woodsboro survivors Sidney and Randy, now in college, trying to move on and put their past traumas behind them. This is made difficult though by the release of the movie within the movie, Stab, which tells the story of the first Scream movie. When a new killer starts picking off people whose names match up with the victims in the first movie, it becomes evident that a copycat is trying to recreate the Woodsboro murders, and this time finish the job and kill Sidney. This film is so much fun. It has a very similar tone to the first movie, and some incredibly tense moments. Remember the scene of Sidney and Hallie trying to climb over the unconscious Ghostface? Wow, that was real nerve-wracking stuff. And really emotional moments like the death of major character Randy. The whole cast in this movie are great and at the top of their game. 2. Scream 2022. Released this year and more than a decade after Scream 4. Scream 2022, or Scream 5 as it really should be called, is a film that had the potential to be either fantastic or awful. Sadly, longtime series director and one of my horror heroes, Wes Craven, passed away in 2015. As he had directed all 4 of the previous movies in the franchise, it was assumed by pretty much everyone that that was now it was over. After all, this was not like other horror franchises where every entry had a new director for hire. Scream had always had a consistency and a continuity to it, and a lot of that was down to the style and skills of Wes Craven. The movie was helmed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gile, who had proven their skills with 2019's amazing Ready or Not, a supernatural tinged reverse slasher movie with its tongue very firmly in its cheek. Kevin Williamson did not return. Writing duties instead went to Ready or Not's co-writer Gary Buzik and Zodiac scribe James Vanderbilt. This film had to walk a very, very fine line. It had to stick to the rules and continuity of the series so far, enough to not piss off the fans, but at the same time not feel like it was just another rehash. Personally, I think they were successful with this more than we could have hoped for. Everything about this movie is flawless. There are laugh out loud moments, jump scares, and scenes so tense they could induce a panic attack. This film feels like a perfect return to the Scream franchise. Also, it feels like it could have been a perfect ending. So when Scream 6 was announced for release next year, it made me wonder whether this would be a rushed studio cash grab. However, Scream 2 proved that with this franchise, that is not always the case. So I will see it and I am looking forward to it. If you're enjoying this video, if you could please subscribe, give us a like, and maybe tickle that bell icon to be notified when we upload future content, that'd be great, thank you. Number 1. Scream, 1996. As I said when I was talking about the lowest ranked film in this franchise, there are no bad movies within the Scream franchise. Every single one of them is well made and entertaining. However, only one of them can truly lay claim to being called a masterpiece and genre game changer, and that of course is the original 1996 Scream. Looking back on all the movies that came out in its wake, throughout the 90s and early 2000s, it's hard to imagine now how groundbreaking this movie was at the time. Because so many movies since its release have taken inspiration from it. Many of them, like The Faculty, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Teaching Mrs. Tingle, were actually written by Kevin Williamson, and those that weren't were definitely trying to emulate his style. Back in the early 90s, Wes Craven had been starting to get a lot of critical praise for his movies, things like People Under the Stairs and New Nightmare. However, he wasn't getting the big hit successes that he got with A Nightmare on Elm Street. With Scream, he got both. There are very few directors who can claim to have made 3 genre-defining movies in 3 separate decades, but Craven is one of them. Scream is a masterclass in balancing humour and horror, in a way that neither seems to get in the way of the other. The pacing and tension building within the movie are amazing, and right from the brutal cold open kill with Drew Barrymore, it feels like you're being taken somewhere very new and very dangerous, but by a safe pair of hands. Everything about Scream is perfect. The script, the direction, the cast, the production design, the music. Every little detail of this film is so well thought out. Williamson's dialogue has always been heightened and quippy. It's not how teenagers really talk, but it's how they would talk if they could. Perhaps one of the most important things about Scream is that, unlike a lot of the other slashers, where we and the characters know the identity of the killer, like, despite wearing masks, we know who Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers are, we know their identities. Scream, however, went for a more sort of whodunit guessing game, more akin to Italian giallo movies than perhaps the original slasher movies. This of course became a trend, and every slasher movie became a guessing game. Many movies have copied Scream in the 26 years since it was released, but none have ever done it as well as Wes Craven's original. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and until next time, stay scared and stay tuned.